The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Sunday afternoon. Thanks, everybody, for joining me and being willing to spend your Sunday with me. Jonathan, thank you. I appreciate the support. All right, today we're going to be talking about Elon Musk. We're going to be looking at about 10 minutes from a half an hour interview he did for the Wall Street Journal. This interview is making the rounds. Different people have spliced it up in different ways. Anyway, we'll be looking at that. Elon Musk seems to have said a lot of interesting things in that debate. Maybe I can actually talk today, and it'll be great. We'll comment on it. We'll have fun with it. He's a he's a character. We'll comment on his haircut, and we will do that. And then we'll also follow up on yesterday's conversation about individualism. There's some things that I wanted to say that still need to be said. So we will do that. That is a follow-up on the follow-up of my debate with Yoram Chazoni, a video of which should be available this week. So as soon as it's available, of course, I will let you all know. Boom, bang, boom. What is boom, bang, boom? Right? You guys lost me. All right. If you would like to help the show grow, share it right now. You can press the share button and you can put it on your Twitter feed and just let people know, hey, Yaron's live right now. And he's going to be talking about Elon Musk, and that's always fun and interesting for people to do. Just to give you a heads up, on Monday, we will have Don Watkins join the program. We'll be talking with Don about his writing career. We'll be talking about writing more generally, fiction, nonfiction writing, what it takes, about his mystery book, and it should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that, and of course, Don will be available for any kind of questions that you might have. So if you have any questions for Don Watkins, the co-author, my co-author on most of my books, then. Yes, that he'll be available on. Now, did I say Monday? It's Tuesday. Tuesday at 8 p.m. I think that's right. Let me just check for you, so I'm not confusing. Yeah, it's the 14th. So it's Tuesday. We'll have Don Watkins on. Yes, I'm confirming that. It'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern time. 7 p.m. Eastern time. I'll be interviewing Don to talk about this. All right, we do have on Saturday the 18th, we'll be hosting a private event, 10, 20 people. It's a small event on how to defeat socialism. If you are interested in that, you can register on yaronbookshow.com, and I think it's $100, but we will be doing that next Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. There'll also be a show, I think, that day. But anyway, if you're interested in a kind of a private gathering on how to defeat socialism, we'll be doing that on the 18th. All right, any other housekeeping notes? Anybody? Yes, of course. Don't forget, you can use the Super Chat to ask questions. I see Bradley, Jonathan, and Brian have already started on that. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. You can use that feature to ask any questions and, of course, to support the show. You can also support the show on yaronbookshow.com/support, Patreon or Subscribestar. And as I think I said yesterday, I am looking for a sponsor who would sponsor the Yaron Rules series moving into the future. So somebody who would become a regular supporter of that series. So I'm looking for a sponsor if anybody out there is interested and willing to do it. All right, so let's jump in with Elon Musk. I mean, I think you all know Elon. He, of course, made his original wealth with PayPal, which he founded or co-founded with Peter Thiel and sold for, I think it was $1.5 billion, or maybe that was his take on it, but it was a significant amount. And of course, today is the CEO of or has founded and is a major shareholder and CEO of some of these companies, but a CEO of Tesla, which also includes Solar City, of SpaceX, of I forget, but the tunnel company, and the BrainLink company, and I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but a bunch of other companies. Anyway, he was invited to do this interview. This is a big Wall Street Journal conference. The audience is CEOs. The conference was being held in Washington, D.C., and you will see Elon Musk is on video, and Elon is actually in, Elon is actually on, in his plant in Austin, Texas. So another Austin connection. Elon is at their facility that's not yet open, but on the verge of being opened in Austin, Texas. And you can see in the background, if you look carefully, you can see some cars. You can see people walking around, but that is kind of the look and feel of the Tesla mega factory in Austin, Texas, east of the city. It's a huge boon for real estate if you're in east of the city. Travis, thank you. Really appreciate the support. And let's see. So we're going to get started. Let me switch to this. You've got the screen. We've got everything. Everybody's in line. Don't forget, you can use the Super Chat to ask questions, $20 each. The goal is to get to $600. I don't have Catherine. It looks like I don't have Ali. I don't have Action Jackson. So we're going to have to try to keep track of this ourselves. Shali, thank you. We will do so. We're about $45 right now, maybe 50. And the goal is $600 over the next hour and a half. Who knows? Maybe we'll go 2 hours. A large extent will depend on the questions you guys asked. All right, here is Elon Musk. Here we go.
Everyone is talking about the infrastructure plan and the bill, and I wanted to ask you, say tomorrow you get a phone call from Joe Biden, and he says...
I think that's unlikely, but sure.
Okay.
He has said some not positive things about Joe Biden, so Joe Biden's unlikely to call. So it's nice to see a little bit of a sense of humor there. The other piece of sense of humor is that haircut. Go figure. He could have combed his hair before he go into television. But, I shouldn't complain. When you're a billionaire, when you're the richest guy on the planet, maybe on some days, and then you can afford to have whatever healthcare you want when you go on video with the Wall Street Journal. But by the way, this video is somebody edited it. It was nice because they've edited out all the parts that I wanted to talk about. You can find the interview, the whole interview itself, a 30-minute interview, 30 plus, I think, on the Wall Street Journal YouTube channel. They kind of pieced it out. Unfortunately, it does have background music, and it has this yellow tint to it. But you can see in the background the car, you can see the factory, you can see how lit it is. It's kind of actually cool. In the original video, it's much whiter and it's much clearer. It's not quite as yellow, so it's a lot better. But anyway, this was more efficient because they've already spliced and cut it in terms of what I would like to talk about. Here we go.
He just gives you a call and he says, I haven't been talking a lot about Tesla lately, but what do you need from this bill? What are your needs? What do you answer him?
To be totally frank, I don't know if at least no one at Tesla has actually brought up whether they care about this bill or not. I think if this bill happened or didn't happen, I don't know. We don't think about it at all, really.
Okay.
Well, one of the reasons they don't think about it at all is because, we'll talk about this, but the bill is clearly going to help Musk's competitors, and it's going to not help him because he's been too successful with electric cars, so he's not going to get any of the tax subsidies that are going to go to his competitors. It really has very little relevance in that sense for Elon Musk. But the rest of what he has to say about this is interesting.
It might be better, honestly.
Notice how shocked she is. She's like, really? You have nothing to say about this?
It might be better if the bill doesn't pass. Because we've spent so much money, It's like the federal budget deficit is insane. You know, it's like $3 trillion federal expenditures are $7 trillion. Federal revenue is $4 trillion. That's a $3 trillion difference in, if this was a company, it'd be a $3 trillion loss. So I don't know if we should be adding to that loss. That seems pretty crazy. Something's got to give. You can't just spend $3 trillion more than you earn every year and expect, don't expect something bad to happen.
I mean, good for Elon. I mean, almost nobody out there in the world, in the political world, in the business world, just out there, nobody is talking about the fact that the U.S. government is running these massive, unprecedented deficits that, as he said, we don't know exactly what bad is going to happen, but we know that it's not sustainable. We know bad stuff is going to happen. Arguably, one of the consequences of these deficits, particularly right now, is the inflation we're starting to experience. But that he is just saying it when in the world out there almost nobody says it. The other thing you recognize about Elon, and if you've watched him over the last couple of years, he says stuff that other people are thinking, and he just says it, even though he's CEO of a publicly traded company, and most CEOs of publicly traded companies are very cautious in terms of what they say. Even though government regulation is a big part of his business, and therefore a lot of CEOs are very careful in terms of not to antagonize the government and not to say things that might antagonize the administration. Elon Musk, to his credit, just says what he thinks. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily make any sense, some of his utterances, but in this case, he's absolutely right. He's courageous to say it. Shouldn't be courageous to say it, because it really is just a statement of fact. But in the world in which we live, in which government and business are so interwound, in which government regulates, controls, where government could penalize you so dramatically, it takes courage to tell the truth. And the other thing I like about what Elon is saying here is he's not pretending to know what the outcome is going to be. He's not saying interest rates will go up or economic growth will be lower or inflation will rise. Or he's just saying, if you run a government with a large deficit over and over and over again over time, bad stuff is going to happen. He's not pretending that he can predict what that stuff is and when it's going to happen, which is the right attitude to have.
I think, this is not good.
Well, Mitch McConnell's actually saying...
And she's kind of shocked by the whole thing. I mean, she doesn't exactly know what to do with it.
If I may elaborate on that, the deficit is more than $3 trillion when you look at the future obligations. So it's $7 trillion of current expenditures, but it's much more than that if you look at future obligations for Social Security, Medicare, and so forth.
And he's absolutely right. Of course, that's not really technically the deficit. That's not the annual deficit. You would have to say that contributes to the aggregate, but absolutely, 7 trillion deficits today, 3 trillion of added deficits, 7 trillion of current spending. I can't remember what the total debt of the United States is right now. It's well over 20 trillion. It's well over 100% of GDP. But then if you add to that all the what we call unfunded liabilities, that is the gap between what Social Security is promising to pay people over the next 50 years and the taxes it collects. And if you do that in Social Security, that gap is there, it's relatively small, but the real gap is what Medicare is promising to pay over the next 50 years. And the tax revenue from Medicare that rises up. Now you've got the equivalent of government debt, of cumulative government debt over the long run, well in excess of $100 trillion. That is what really is unsustainable. That is what will bankrupt this country and force this country to really change the way it functions, either through mass default, either by dramatic increases in how poor we are, or by massive shrinking of government, which I think would be good, but the current world thinks would be a frigging disaster. But something is going to have to give at some point. Hard to tell exactly when, but at some point, and Elon is kind of giving us a little bit of a warning. And the beauty about Elon Musk saying it is, if I say it, maybe 5,000 people listen to what I say, between the podcast and the video and everything else. When Elon Musk says it, millions and millions and millions of people listen to what he says. So in that sense, he is speaking truth to millions and millions of people, and that's incredibly powerful. And it's great to have somebody of Elon Musk's status as a celebrity, really, speaking truth. And he has some credibility because he's Elon Musk, because of his history as a successful entrepreneur. Now, we'll get some of the other stuff he says in a minute. I'm not going to be super positive on Elon Musk throughout this. There are going to be points where I'm going to have to be quite critical.
We're running this incredible deficit. Something's got to give. I don't know. This can't keep going.
Well, Mitch McConnell said something similar. That it wasn't too, not as extreme as you. But okay, so let's say his follow-up question is, okay, Elon, you don't think we need to spend anything on the infrastructure? If he says to you, what is the biggest improvement we can make to the U.S. infrastructure? What do you say?
I think we generally could have better airports, better highways, especially in cities that are congested. We've got to do something to deal with the extreme traffic.
This is very unusual for somebody to actually talk about extreme traffic. Environmentalists want to get rid of cars. They want to get cars off the road. They don't want to have to deal with extreme traffic. The city governments in places like San Francisco and Los Angeles and generally leftist cities, which is most cities, would like to find ways to get rid of cars. Even Austin, Texas, one of the reasons you're getting a lot of congested development, high-rises, condos in downtown, is because they're trying to drive people to come downtown. They don't want them in the suburbs. That's their solution to deal with traffic. If you look at the big parts of LA, of San Francisco, even of a place like Austin, there's very little construction of highways. There's very little improvement of highways, particularly around the downtowns. And nobody wants to talk about this. And if you live in Southern California and you get stuck in traffic jams where it should take you, 45 minutes, and instead it takes you 3 hours, which often happened to me, just going from Orange County to LA, that's a big chunk of your life. And the reason it's not being done is because nobody wants to solve this issue of traffic. And Elon is suggesting, but the fact that he's willing to talk about it. And again, the fact is that the environmentalists out there, our politicians, the people who can affect this, sadly our roads are not private, the people who can affect this have no interest in talking about this. I mean, if you really wanted an infrastructure bill, that's what it should be focused on. But of course, it should be paid locally. I mean, California should solve California's infrastructure problems. Why should people in Kansas pay taxes in order to solve the infrastructure problems in California? All of these issues are local issues. They're not federal issues. Now, it's true that the highways are, quote, federal. They shouldn't be. They should be given to the states and let the states fund them.
Which I think is some combination of double-deckering freeways and building tunnels. But
double-deckering and tunnels. I mean, I always think about that when I'm on LA. How would you solve this problem? And it's obvious that what you need are express lanes that are double-deckers or express lanes that are tunnels. You don't need exits in every place, but you need one alternative is to have an express lane in one level and the off-ramps on another level. I mean, there's so many ways you could do this. And you got to put the civil engineers on it, but that's the only thing that you should be using really infrastructure on. Airports, again, should be funded by the airlines. It should be funded by the airport authorities, or you should sell the airports. Airports are easy to privatize and have competition between airports, given that they serve as hubs. That's not that hard to do. And then have the airlines fund, and we pay higher airfares in order to construct the infrastructure, which makes sense. If you use it, you should pay for it. If you don't use it, somebody who doesn't fly shouldn't be taxed in order to pay for airports. This is why the best way to pay for infrastructure on highways is to use toll roads. And you don't even need to use toll roads anymore. You can just put a GPS tracker on every car, in a sense. But for that, you would have to secure the information and so on. But at least on the highways, that would read and you pay by use rather than everybody paying for the infrastructure, whether they use it or not.
If we don't do something, we will be stuck in traffic for forever. As autonomous vehicles come to the fore, and it's easier to drive without going through the pain of having to drive yourself, which is absolutely coming and will be one of the biggest transformations ever in human civilization. There will be more cars on the road, and the traffic will get much worse.
I want to just stay a little bit more on the role of government. You said at this conference...
I mean, I'm not sure autonomous vehicles, traffic becomes worse. I think autonomous vehicles potentially drive faster, they drive safer, you get fewer accidents, and they drive faster, they're better, you know. People slowing down to look at an accident on the other side of the highway that causes traffic jams on your side of the highway won't happen because autonomous cars won't slow down. So the problem is going to be, the real traffic nightmare is going to be the transition from when you've got both autonomous drivers and regular drivers on the road. That is where you're going to get bogged down, and that's where you're going to have problems. But when you actually get close to 100% conversion to autonomous driving, there should be a lot less traffic jams.
Actually, a year ago, that you think government should really just be hands-off when it comes to innovation. Though with this bill, there is a lot of support for EVs, and it could be the biggest change that we've seen throughout the country in terms of the infrastructure of EVs, and it helps Tesla. What do you think the role of government should be?
I think the role of government should be that of like a referee, but not a player on the field. Generally, you know, government should, I think, just try to get out of the way and not impede progress.
This is great. Again, it's great to have somebody of his caliber and his status saying these things. Now, I think he undermines it. We'll see in a minute, but I think he undercuts it in the end because of the history of Tesla. I think the history of Tesla is very problematic in terms of the government not being a player, in terms of the government just being a referee, in terms of keeping hands off. That is a real problem coming from the CEO of Tesla, as we'll talk about in a little bit.
I think there's a general problem, not just in the U.S., but in most countries,
this part is
where
good, though.
The rules and regulations keep increasing every year. Rules and regulations are immortal. They don't die. There's not a natural... Occasionally you see some law with a sunset provision, but really, otherwise, the vast majority of rules and regulations live forever. And so if more rules and regulations are applied every year, and it just keeps growing and growing, eventually it takes longer and longer, and it's harder to do things. And there's not really an effective garbage collection system for removing rules and regulations.
Yeah, good for him. All of this is good stuff.
And so gradually this hardens the arteries of civilization, where you're able to do less and less over time. So I think government should be really trying hard to get rid of rules and regulations that perhaps had some merit at some point, but don't have merit currently. But there's very little effort in this direction. This is a big problem. But you know, just going back to that infrastructure bill for a second, because sometimes the criticism of Tesla is like, hey, Tesla gets all these subsidies. But it's worth noting that for the vehicle purchase tax credit, the $7,500, Tesla stopped getting that like 2 years ago.
Yeah. So Tesla stopped getting the $7,500 tax credit in 2018. But Tesla got the $7,500 tax credit during the most important time in its life, the early adoption period. The period in which Tesla sold very few cars, a period in which, EV was an unproven technology, a period in which buyers might have been hesitant to buy it, a period in which Teslas were generally very expensive. Basically, Tesla got the $7,500 when it mattered. Today, when it's producing tens of thousands of cars, it matters less. But would Tesla have survived as a company if it hadn't gotten the $7,500 credit when it mattered the most in its early years? Probably not. But it's much more than that. I mean, this is where Elon Musk is not being honest. In 2010, when Tesla was in dire straits and on the verge of bankruptcy, the government gave it a $465 million loan from the government. Now, that's not the government playing referee. That's the government being a player on the field. That's the government picking winners and losers. But all of that is dwarfed by the fact that the government provides Tesla with carbon credits. In other words, what the government does is, if your fleet generates less than a certain amount of carbon emissions as it's run, if your cars produce less than a certain amount of emissions, they don't count the batteries, they don't count the production of the car, they only count the car as running, then you get credits. Credits then you can sell to companies that need those credits in order to fulfill the regulatory requirements. So every car company must have carbon emissions below a certain amount. If they're below a certain amount, they get credits. But if they don't get credits, they can buy the credits. Who do they buy the credits from? From companies that get them from the government. Tesla, because it's all electric and therefore qualifies, gets huge amounts of these credits. And then what happens is that Chrysler, General Motors, Ford, other auto companies in Europe, in Asia, buy those credits from Tesla. Last year, for example, I think it's last year, Tesla generated $500 million of tax credits. Guess what the profitability of Tesla was last year? Just a little under 500 million. In other words, without the tax credits, Tesla would break even today, or actually take a loss. And this has been true forever. Without the tax credits, Tesla would have never survived, would have never had the capital to invest in their cars, would have never been able to grow, and would have never been profitable. To this day, it's not profitable net, the carbon credits. So yes, they no longer get the $7,500 credit. You know why? Because the $7,500 credit that the government gives is only to get you started, right? So once you, I think, produce more than 20,000 cars, you don't get the tax credit anymore. So Tesla is past that. It doesn't get it. So the tax credit today is going to other manufacturers of EV cars, of electric cars, that are producing small batches. They're getting that advantage that Tesla got when it was small. So it would be very convenient for Tesla, if none of its competitors got the benefits it got when it was started. For example, the $7,500 credit. Actually, Biden's bill increases that credit to $4,500, an additional $4,500, but only for companies that use labor unions, union labor. Now, of course, I'm against that, but note that Tesla does not use union labor, so it does not qualify for this credit. So, of course, at the very straightforward level, Elon Musk benefits enormously from these laws and these rules and from these massive carbon credits that they get and tax incentives. Now, I'm all for tax incentives, but for example, Nevada and other states have given Tesla. But at the end of the day, fine. They're getting credits. They're getting tax credits. They're getting carbon credits. That's the law. That in a sense, working within the system. But for then Elon to say, well, we don't get any benefits anymore. We don't get any tax credits anymore. A little disingenuous. To say, don't give any tax credits to our competitors when we got them for years. I mean, it would be nice if he at least acknowledged, look, we got them. I'm sorry we got them. We shouldn't have got them. The government should have never been involved. But then he would have to say, the reality is we wouldn't exist today if not for those tax credits. This is where people like Elon, it's very complicated. It's very hard to know how to think about them. On the one hand, heroic and positive, and says a lot of good things and says the right things, role of government, other things we'll get to. But then he kind of, in a sense, is dishonest about what Tesla has been all about.
Whereas everyone else, I think, except for GM, still gets the $7,500 tax credit. So,
but there's a reason for that. Once you produce more than X number of cars, you don't get any anymore. So it's there to get you started. So you got it when you got started. GM got it when they got started. But since those two companies are producing enough cars now that tax credit is going to all the other people who are in that position. And yet you want that to go away. Really? Is that really your stance? Now that you established because you benefited from all those government favors?
all of our sales this year and I think last year were had nothing to do with the tax credit because
carbon
we were no longer eligible
credit.
because we'd made so many electric cars. Tesla's made roughly 2/3 of all the electric cars in the United States.
True.
I'm not sure if most people are aware of that. Yeah.
And how much of that would have been possible without the government support?
So Tesla's made basically twice as many electric vehicles as the rest of industry combined. And we don't need the $7,500 tax credit.
That's right. Once you reach a certain size, you don't need the tax credit anymore. Now you're big enough. You dominate the market. But it's curious that once you're big enough that you're not getting the tax credit anyway, now you're advocating for its rejection. I'm curious if anybody knows if Elon Musk was arguing pre-2018, maybe 2012, 14, 16. Was he arguing then that we should get rid of this credit, $7,500 credit? I doubt it.
Credit. I would say, honestly, I would just can this whole bill. Don't pass it. That's my recommendation.
What about the support though for the charging network? I mean, there
This
are,
is the
there
best
are parts
part.
of this bill,
Unnecessary.
and no.
No, I mean, do we need support for gas stations? We don't.
I mean, that's the best answer he gave. Do we need support for gas stations? It's what I mentioned when I analyzed the infrastructure bill, and a lot of the money is going for these charging stations, and I talked about the fact that why do you need them? There's a profit motive in that. Once you get enough electric cars, and we're getting there, why wouldn't gas stations add them on? Well, ultimately, they would replace the gas stations. Why do you need government to intervene? Did government build the original gas stations? I mean, Elon Musk gets it. But when it comes to actually benefiting from it, he's eager to jump into it and maybe even lobby for it when he's the direct beneficiary. When he has the ability to step back and take a look and evaluate without it impacting his actual business, then he gets it. He really does, right?
Don't. So there's no need for this for support for a charging
Absolutely.
network. I would delete it. Delete.
Delete. Look.
Okay, all right.
I'm literally saying get rid of all subsidies.
And
He's literally saying get rid of all subsidies. And I commend him for saying that. I commend him for saying that. I wish more CEOs would say that. I wish everybody in the industry would say that. But it's much easier to say that after you don't get the subsidies anymore.
But also for oil and gas.
And that's kind of cheating, because also for oil and gas don't get subsidies. I hear this all the time, but they get their equipment written off in terms of taxes and things like that. So does every other business. There might be some favorable treatment of certain types of arrangements for the oil and gas industry, but yeah, let's get rid of all subsidies. All subsidies. Let's get rid of all deductions from corporate taxes and make it, I don't know, really, really simple, really, really straightforward, so the tax code cannot be manipulated. Or how about what I've always advocated for, which is basically zero corporate tax, and then there's no way to game the system. And so I just wish he had done this when he was the direct beneficiary of the subsidy which he's talking about. Now, is Elon Musk for getting rid of the carbon credit, which generates $500 million in revenue for his company? I don't know. I doubt it. I haven't heard anything about it. Does he consider that a subsidy? Maybe. I hope so. I hope that's what he includes with let's get rid of all subsidies.
if you think about also how this affects your competitors, is that impact how some of your view on this?
I mean, maybe they need it. I don't know. But I think just generally, I'm in favor of deleting subsidies. I mean, when we started Tesla, there were no EV subsidies at all, and gasoline was super cheap. We did not anticipate any subsidies. That came later, and that came late
at key points in Tesla's development.
The $7,500 tax credit came as a result not of Tesla activity, but of General Motors lobbying for it. I would just say, just delete them all.
All right, but there's some other good things in this bill that some would argue. I mean, a lot of money earmarked for R&D. Would you want to put that towards something?
No.
Okay. All right. We're going to move on from the bill because I think we get what you're saying on it.
In general, we should just, if we don't cut government spending, something really bad's going to happen. This is crazy.
This is good.
Our spending is so far in excess of revenue, it's insane.
Excellent.
Like, you could zero out all billionaires in the country. This is all this like anti-billionaire BS. If you zero it out...
Well, that's pretty cool for a billionaire that says there's a lot of anti-billionaire BS. I mean, there you go. That's the kind of courage that we need to see more businessmen have. That's the kind of, non-equivocating that we need to see more billionaires have. It's only when businessmen stand up and say the kind of things Elon Musk is saying right now that the world is going to change. And I'm encouraged by his willingness to say it, disappointed that he's not willing to fully admit the role government played and the role these subsidies played in Tesla's own development. I'd like to see him analyze that and prove me wrong and show me that it didn't have a big, impact on the development. But good for him for standing up against the tax on billionaires. Good for him for standing up for all of this. But
all the billionaires, you still wouldn't solve the deficit.
Yes, I'll ask you another question around the billionaire BS. Say tomorrow we've talked. You get the phone call from President Biden. Next day, actually, we decide we elect you to Congress. Somehow this happens. You're now working on tax bills. You're working on tax policy. How do you tax someone like you? How do you tax billionaires?
I mean, first of all, I pay a lot of tax. I mean, my marginal tax rate is like
good for him.
53%. So that's not trivial. And then obviously there's like, asset-based taxes, the sales tax, and everything else. There's also the estate tax. I think the estate tax is a good tax. Like, if you think of assets beyond a certain level that are far beyond, let's say, somebody's ability to consume, then at a certain point, really what you're doing is capital allocation.
So he just said wealth tax is a good tax. You could say that the wealth tax is one of the least destructive taxes, but a good tax? There's no such thing as a good tax, as we know. Again, consistency would be great. But this point he's about to make, and let me rewind this just a tad because just to capture the full context. This point he's about to make about capital allocation is really, really good. Again, from an economic perspective, more so, I wish he had some more moral context for it. But this is a really, really good point he makes about taxing. It's a point I've made many, many times. And what happens when you tax the rich, the so-called rich.
Let's say somebody's ability to consume, then, at a certain point, really what you're doing is capital allocation. So it's not money for personal expenditures. What you're doing is capital allocation. And it does not make sense to take the job of capital allocation away from people who have demonstrated great skill in capital allocation and give it to an entity that has demonstrated very poor skill in capital allocation, which is the government.
This is the point he's making, right? What do rich people do with their money beyond the point of consumption, beyond what they can consume? There's only so much you can consume. What do rich people actually do? What do wealthy people actually do with their money? Well, they save it, the equivalent of save. What does that mean? It means they invest it. They allocate capital. They invest in startups and businesses. They put it into their own business. They allocate capital in the economy. Rich people don't have a vault with all their cash sitting in it, like Scrooge McDuck did in the cartoons, right? They actually have all this capital invested in businesses, allocated to businesses. And what he's saying is when you tax that money, when you tax Elon Musk, the Bezos, the Bill Gateses of the world, what you're really doing is taking money from the smartest, best capital allocators in the world, from people who understand business, understand innovation, understand progress, and give it to an incompetent, pathetic entity, government, that has proven to be really, really bad at allocating capital. Why would you do that if you care about economic growth? Again, from the economic dimension, right?
You can think of the government essentially as a corporation in the limit. The government is simply the biggest corporation with a monopoly on violence.
There's a problem with viewing government as a corporation, which I'd love to get into with Elon Musk someday. But he's right. The government has the monopoly over the use of violence. That's what makes it government. But given that it does so many other things, do you want to give the entity with the monopoly over the use of violence, of force, the ability to do all these other things? And
where you have no recourse.
Can
so how much money do you want to give that entity?
Could you explain the last?
How much money do you want to give that entity? Exactly.
Last part quickly, and then I want to move on to some product stuff.
Sure. I mean, I can talk for a bit longer if you'd like than the half an hour.
He's enjoying this.
If you're worried about getting through other questions.
I hear we have nobody else joining us at this conference.
Yeah, I mean, government is a corporation in the limit. So it is the most corporate thing. It is maximum corporation, but it's also a monopoly, and also is the only one that's allowed legally to do violence. So why would you want to give a corporation with no competition that can't even really go bankrupt more money? Now, it's not as though I think the government shouldn't exist or that there are not good things that the government can do or things that are necessary for the government to do. So I'm not somebody who's sort of an extreme libertarian.
I mean, I don't know what extreme libertarian is. He's not an anarchist, which is good. He could be more around limited government than he is. But it looks like in terms of our billionaires, he's about as good as it gets in terms of those who are willing to actually go on camera and talk about this stuff.
And thinks the government should not do anything. I just think we should minimize what the government does, because the government's efficiency at spending is just going to be lower than a competitive commercial company, but by a lot.
I'm going to shift
by a lot. That's perfect. Well said.
Away from government, come back to your world. The workload at Tesla is quite a lot. Have you? And I know now you could regain the chairman.
This is just fun to listen to.
Have you thought about that? Have you thought about your sort of your title and your position there right now?
I mean, it's interesting that these titles. You know that there's actually only three titles that actually mean anything for a corporation. It's president, secretary, and treasurer, and technically they can be the same person. And all these other titles are just basically made up. So CEO is a made-up title, CFO is a made-up title, general counsel a made-up title. Don't mean anything.
That's a nice. I think a room of CEOs are.
Well, I mean, he's not right that they don't mean anything. He's kind of being flippant, but that's okay. It's always fun to watch. They don't mean anything from a legal corporate entity perspective, but they mean something a lot because they're contracts. There's as a CEO, you have a contract with the board, with the company, that gives you certain authorities and certain responsibilities. So it's bogus to say because in the corporation, incorporated documents, you only have those three titles, president, treasurer, secretary. Those are the only titles that exist, any more than you go to a middle manager and make him a director of research. That's meaningless. No, it means something. It means something. Now, you know, he's being Elon Musk. This is where he gets a little flippant and a little ridiculous. You'll hear about the title he gave himself in a minute.
How we feel about that? Yep.
It was like obviously just somebody's marketing experiment.
So I guess I'll be more direct. I mean, are you considering stepping down as CEO? Would you transfer, be chairman, and think about being chief product officer? I mean, since CEO title doesn't matter anyway.
I changed my title to Techno King.
He's Techno King.
And by the way, this is a formal SEC filing. I'm legally or whatever Techno King. I just did that as kind of like a joke because just to show that these titles don't mean a lot. You can see what is actually legally necessary if you fill out the form for creating a C corp, and then you'll see it's president, treasurer, and secretary. You need a director too, but that's basically it. And then all these other, chief whatever officer are basically just made up.
All right, so ended on that fun note from Elon Musk being Elon Musk, and he is now techno king of. He's not the CEO; he's the techno king of Tesla. It would be interesting to study his management style and see what actually happens within the business. I don't think they're BS titles. I mean, firstly, because of regulations, the CEO has to sign off on financial statements. So does the CFO. The CFO has all kinds of liabilities. You can joke and kid around about this stuff, but it's just not true. You need certain titles. Somebody has to be responsible for marketing. There is such a thing as chief marketing officer, and they do take on the responsibility of things like that. So, when you're in a position that you are, as Elon Musk is, you can poo-poo these things, but for most companies, a lot of these things are crucial. It is a good interview. It was a fun interview. A lot of good, positive things were said. I wish Musk would just come clean on his view on all the subsidies that he got. It would be good to have a little PowerPoint presentation where he showed us they didn't matter, and Tesla would have been fine without the government loan in 2010, and without all the different subsidies, and without the tax credits, and without the carbon credits. I doubt he can do it because I don't think it's true. I think he built his company based on those, and wouldn't have survived if not for those. But it's still great to see a CEO come out and talk about government spending the way he did. It's great to see a CEO come out and state that there should be no subsidies, even if he's not consistent applying that to his own company. It's great that gets into the debate and that gets out there into the culture, and that we start discussing these kind of issues. So I want to see many, many more CEOs do that. I'd like to see a lot more CEOs interact the way Elon Musk does with the world. And it would be good, again, if they were more straight up and didn't carry the baggage that Elon Musk carries. Unfortunately, he does, because, I mean, it's not even the fact that it's not just Tesla, right? Solar City benefits enormously from all kinds of government regulations, controls, tax credits, all kinds of things like that that are created. So it's very, very hard when Musk says these things to take him completely seriously. And indeed, I saw a video of Zakaria, who's like on, what is he, CNN, CNBC, I'm not sure, calling him on it and kind of saying he's a hypocrite. He's too open to that, and yet I still enjoy hearing it said. Still enjoy hearing it said. All right. And remember, Elon Musk has done some other pretty exciting things. Remember when he told California that if that he was not shutting down his plant in spite of the lockdowns, that he was going to continue working. And if they wanted to come and shut him down, they would have to come down and arrest everybody there. And he was going to be in the factory, so they would arrest him as well. And by the way, he was going to move the entire factory to Texas if this is the attitude they had. That was brilliant. That was perfect. That is exactly what businessmen should have done during the COVID lockdown. You don't get to tell us what essential workers are. We get to decide what we think is essential or not. If our workers want to work, if we want to employ them, then we're going to continue doing it. So good for Elon Musk for doing that. And then Michael reminds us of the time that, was it Michael? Let's see, who did that? Yes, no, it was Shai Levy, who said, have you seen the incredible shake their fist at the sky tweet? Yes, that was a great tweet. And that's why I'm not going to read it accurately because I don't have it up in front of me. But basically, when they talked about the launching of satellites for internet connection all over the world, I mean, part of what SpaceX is doing is they're launching thousands of satellites into space. They will all be linked, all be connected, and all be providing ubiquitous internet connection in the entire world. And somebody asked Elon Musk, well, what about the local regulators, the regulators in these? How will they regulate the internet if everything is going, if you're doing a direct link between the phone of somebody in China or the phone of somebody in Africa and the satellite above him? How are the regulators going to do it? What are the regulators going to do? How are they going to control this? And Elon Musk said, well, they can shake their fists at the sky. And that actually, I think that tweet, let me see if I can find it. I think that tweet is actually got to be the best tweet ever. And it might be, it's definitely the best thing Elon Musk ever said. And it might be the best tweet anybody's ever had, because it's so, it's so just, it reflects exactly that. It reflects that the alternative is to be a mystic. The alternative is shaking the fist. I mean, we developed the technology. You want to control it? You have to be a witch doctor. There's no way to control it once you do that. Unfortunately, I can't really find, it's not going to be easy for me to find that tweet. Oops, that's not what I want to do. It's not going to be particularly easy to find the tweet, but we'll see if I can find it, because it was very succinct. It was very good. Yeah, this is the tweet. So he says, our satellites launching in the next few months have inter-satellite laser links, so no local downlink needed. Probably active in 4 to 6 months. This was written in September 1. Michael Sheets writes, how does transmitting into a country without the local downlink work on the regulatory side? Oh my God, what are we going to do? How's the regulations going to work? And his answer is, they can shake their fist at the sky. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that in terms of tweets, in my view. All right, let's see. Let's see where we go from here. We've got a bunch of super chat questions, so we're going to take those. We are way behind on the super chat, so we're at like 140. When the goal for every one of these shows is $600, so I'm hoping you guys chime in with some $20, $50, $100 super chat questions. Show your support for the show. It's value for value. We have a lot of people watching now live, maybe some new people watching right now live. First of all, like the show before you leave, but also show your support for the show using the super chat feature that exists here. You can ask a question using it, or you can just make a contribution. Either way, I very much appreciate it. We've got quite a bit to catch up if we're going to make the $600 goal. All right, let's take a few. Let's take a few of the super chat questions, the $20 and above questions, and then we will get back to the topic at hand, which we're going to move to, which is individualism. Bradley says, or let's say Michael first. Michael says, Elon Musk seems like a rational, reality-oriented person most of the time. I think he would like you if you got the chance to sit down with him. Maybe you could move him in an objectivist direction, and it would grow your show enormously. Yeah, I'd love to sit down with Elon Musk. Anybody out there have a connection to Elon Musk? Get him on the line, and we could do an interview. That would be amazing if we could make that happen. I don't know how to get a hold of Elon Musk, but I will do what I can. I will try to get a hold of him so that we can make that happen, because I think it would be really, really cool. All right, I'm going to take these two $20 questions that are not related, and then we'll jump into, well, we've got three, but we'll jump into the issue of individualism and its connection to conservatism. Bradley says, I might be able to build a unicorn company. This will increase my self-esteem from the productive virtue, but I am new to objectivism, warrior, lack integrity and independence to withstand public exposure. Any advice, please? It's an interesting question, the way it's phrased. Look, if you can build a unicorn company, you don't build a unicorn company in order to gain self-esteem. Building a unicorn company will raise your self-esteem, but I suspect that in order to build it, you already have to have some substantial self-esteem in order to manage, to navigate, and to work hard, and to do the things that you will need to do in order to build a unicorn. You already have to have a lot of self-esteem, and it will benefit your self-esteem. It'll make you money. It will change the world. It would make you happier. You'll have fulfilled the goal. That's why you should do it. if you're worried about whether you can withstand and whether you can cope and whether you can live with the public exposure and whether you have the integrity and independence to keep your wit about you, as the poem If says, when you're in the limelight, then those are things you need to work on. Those are things you need to think about. There's no way to gain the objectivist virtues without thinking about them and trying to integrate them into your life. What you have to convince yourself and you have to integrate into you is the fact that integrity and independence are crucial to your own happiness, crucial to your own well-being, that indeed you will suffer if you don't have them, particularly when you're in the limelight. That is what you have to build into your own psychology and into your own value structure, is the importance of integrity and independence, what they mean, how to apply them well, vis-a-vis the world out there, no matter whether you have public exposure or not. Indeed, if you lack integrity and independence, even if you don't build a unicorn company, you will sell yourself short, and you will not be as happy as you could be, and you will not achieve your goals in life. So integrity and independence are crucial to achieving your goals in life. They're crucial to achieving happiness in life. They're as crucial as building a unicorn company. And indeed, if you have them, they will help you build that unicorn company. You have to convince yourself that that is true, and you have to work on it. How do you do that? You do that by thinking about it, by living it, by reading about it. Reread. The best example for this, yes, reread The Fountainhead. If you haven't read The Fountainhead, read The Fountainhead, and read the scene where Howard Rourke gives up a lot of money to build a building and walks away from it because they demand changes that he thinks would destroy the integrity of his creation. Read about the reasoning behind his blowing up the building. But, maybe more important than that, read about going to the quarry and what that does to his soul and how it keeps his soul intact. So I would reread The Fountainhead and then work on it. Think through various scenarios. Convince yourself, not in an artificial way, but in a way connected to reality, that having that kind of integrity, having the kind of independence that Howard Rourke has, will actually benefit you in every aspect of your life. Jeffy says, too much to do at the restaurant to listen live. Hopefully you'll do a show Monday or Tuesday. Yes, Tuesday, 7 p.m. East Coast time, Jeffrey. So catch up with you then. I know Saturday, this time of day, is prep at the restaurant, and there's just no way. Talk about productive work. It's productive work. And as tempted as he is to listen to me, productive work calls, as it should. Theme Master, thank you for the support. I really appreciate it. So badly, I hope that helps. Yaron's rules for living, I think, should help, but mainly The Fountainhead, Virtue of Selfishness. Read OPA, the section on integrity and the section on independence and their importance. Read and then integrate. Think about them. Integrate them into all your other values, into your life experience. Andrew brings us to, let's do Lee, and then we'll do Andrew. Hi, Yaron. Any tips for cultivating a deep and healthy appreciation of art? For example, promoting a stronger emotional response or recognizing false premises in one's evaluation. That's a big topic. It's a big topic which I intend to do a future rules for living on. So I'm not going to cover it with as much as the topic demands, but that is definitely a topic I want to do a whole show on. It deserves a whole show, and I've promised, I think, in the past to do shows on this, and I will this December do a whole show on cultivating a deeper and healthy appreciation of art. But I would say that you need two things. One is expose yourself to it. you're not going to get an appreciation without exposing yourself to it. And that means not just browsing the internet for a bunch of photos of artwork. That means serious contemplation and serious immersion with the art. Don't look at pictures of sculpture, go to a museum and try to stand in front of a sculpture and see what you see in it and what it does to you. It requires real introspection while you're observing the art, which requires time and effort. So immerse yourself in a particular art form. Music, classical music in particular, is another opportunity for doing that. If paintings and sculpture, you kind of have to go to an exhibit, read a novel, and really immerse yourself in the experience of doing it. Don't listen on tape while you're driving, or listen on tape while you're taking a walk, or listen on tape while you're having a conversation with 3 other people. Try to really invest the time to focus on the experience. So that's one. Second, learn a little bit about the art form, about the artist, about the history, about the context. And maybe take some art appreciation classes. I think there's pretty good art appreciation classes. I took some on classical music in my 20s. I've taken some art appreciation classes that are pretty good. As long as they stay away from so-called modern art or modern non-art, they're pretty good. You'll learn a lot. So take those classes. They'll teach you how to look, how to appreciate, how to examine, how to take it in, what to focus on. And I will talk about that on the show that I will do on art appreciation. I will talk a little bit about that as well. But don't shy away from picking up an art appreciation book, doing something on the Learning Company, finding some YouTube videos on art appreciation. Definitely highly recommended as part of kind of the path to getting into it. All right, Andrew asks, and this is get us into a little bit into the topic of individualism. Andrew says, when conservatives claim that marriage is impractical without duty, why do you think they exclude romantic love? Presumably some are loving marriages, yet think men would ditch their wives impulsively absent ethical edicts. Well, I don't think they're excluding a romantic love. I mean, you kind of say it. They think romantic love is conditional on their sense of duty, that they will undermine their romantic love without they would just jump on the woman in the bar, the good-looking woman in the bar that Ben Shapiro likes to raise, right? They would jump at the opportunity of going and having sex with her and jeopardize their entire marriage, jeopardize their entire relationship for doing that. And the only reason they don't do it is out of some sense of duty. Yoram Chazoni talked a lot about marriage to work, right? Is a process of honoring in a sense as some form of duty. And of course, honoring your spouse is of course an essential part of a healthy marriage. I mean, imagine if you didn't have respect for your wife, if you didn't honor your spouse, then yeah, I mean, but is it a duty or is it a precondition for the love? The reason you love the person is because you respect them, admire them, and therefore honor them. But you see, conservatives have a really hard time with human emotions. Conservatives believe, particularly the Christian version, they believe that we are all born of sin. We're all sinners. This is the whole idea of original sin. We're all open to temptation all the time. We cannot hold on to values. We cannot be consistent. We cannot have integrity. And as a consequence, there's no way we can stay married because temptation is just everywhere. And the only way to get us to stay married is, in a sense, to provide some external motivation. You'll go to hell if you get a divorce. That's a good one. Or you've got to do it because it's your duty, and morality is about duty. So conservatives are about, let's stick to tradition. Why? Because it's tradition, because it's your duty to do it. And therefore they have a particular view of marriage that is focused and oriented around duty. And yes, they can have loving marriages, but they also know themselves, and they know that they are sinful and can be sinful and will be sinful if they had the opportunity, and therefore they have to have some external force, call it a duty-bound morality, to keep them in check, or God is watching. But it's not just God, it's sometimes just this Kantian view of duty. And this is what makes conservatism and religion and this whole moral tradition so unappealing. I want a rational reason. Why should I stick with my wife? Now, I don't think it's that hard to figure out a rational reason, assuming your wife represents a value to you. But they, you know, and Yaron basically said this, they don't really believe reason is applicable to these areas in life. I mean, his view of reason is a Kantian view of reason. His view of reason is that reason is detached from reality. Reason is not a guide to action, certainly not a guide to morality. And so, you know, conservatives, because of original sin, because of their view of our morality as a series of duties, a series of commandments, cannot conceive of rational self-interest. They cannot conceive of reason guiding you towards the good. Let's say marriage is good. Can conceive of that marriage actually be guided by rational self-interest. There has to be a duty associated with it. Right. Now, the other aspect of this is that some of their marriages suck. Some of their marriages don't have love anymore, are not romantic anymore, are not a significant value to them anymore. And many of them feel a duty to stick with it. Now, I'm not talking about kind of the responsibility to your long-term values to try to work things out and try to make it work and to make sure that it's not, you know, you're not going through a rough patch and this is really the long-term value and so on. I'm talking about a marriage that's clearly not working and people stick with it out of a sense of duty. And that's unbelievably destructive to them and to everybody involved. Right? And that's what conservatism leads to, particularly forms of conservatism, of religion, which don't believe in divorce, like conservative Judaism or Catholicism. Scott says, and then I'll get to some more stuff I want to say about individualism, and I will say here that this is the last Super Chat question, so we're way behind on Super Chat, 175. Our goal is, again, 600, so we're way behind, and we're already gone for more than an hour. If anybody wants to support the show and show support for the show, this is important that we get to these goals because it's what keeps the show going. It's what I live off of in a sense, right? It's the payment for the show, so value for value. So I hope some of you will consider supporting the show, yaronbrookshow.com/support, but also right here on the Super Chat. It has a certain benefit of the immediacy of it and the pleasure of just doing it right now. And I know some of you don't like me asking, but we're way behind right now. So if you like these shows, I'd appreciate you showing the support for them. You know, if somebody came in with $200-300 to get us really to where we need to be, that would be terrific. All right, Scott says, I'm glad you like Yaron, but he's the intellectual force behind national conservatism. Is it possible they're not as bad as you thought? No, I mean, they're much worse than Yaron is, and in many respects, because I think Yaron represents a certain version of national conservatism that is not necessarily the dominant one. But Yoram's version of national conservatism is really bad. And you have to be able to separate here between the fact that the individuals, core individuals, might be good people, might be nice people, might be people you like hanging out with, but they have terrible ideas. And I think that if Yoram's ideas about national conservatism, Yoram believes that the state should have religion as its mandate, that the United States should be a Christian nation, that Christianity should be taught in schools. Yoram believes that we should slow down growth in many aspects of technology because it's too disruptive, that we should break up all the big tech companies, that we should use the government to impact culture. I mean, Yoram probably believes that we should reverse, certainly Roe versus Wade, but, you know, if not him, then the others certainly do, but also gay marriage. Yoram, you know, the national conservative agenda, qua agenda, is horrific for an individualist like me. It's not a little bit bad. It's you know, about as bad as you can imagine. About as bad as you can imagine. And when you bring in the Catholics, who are, yes, whose ideas are worse than Yoram's, it's a disaster. And of course, in a movement that actually is going to have impact on the United States and Europe, it's the Catholics who are going to have the impact. It's the Catholics who are the intellectuals. It's the Catholics who represent Christianity, that is the majority religion. It's the Catholics who are going to dominate. And as a consequence, it's not even close in terms of how bad they are. These ideas are the enemy of everything I believe the Founding Fathers represented. They're the enemy of liberty, of freedom, of individualism, of everything that I stand for. And they're not, in that sense, better than the left. Now, I think Yoram has a little bit more appreciation for markets, appreciation for individualism, but even he wants to regulate markets, wants to control markets. When he thinks, and it came out in the debate, when he thinks they have gone awry, where they don't fit with his vision of where the country should be heading, with his ideals for what America should happen. He is fine with central planners, and he says so, both in the debate and a debate. Politicians will have to decide when to curb certain industries, when to put on certain tariffs, when to subsidize other industries in the name of the common good, in the name of the national good, which is for him more important than the individual's good. Now, the debate turned out to be mostly about the value of individualism because he doesn't want to say those things. You know, he didn't want to debate his views because it would have got a lot more unpleasant because I would have had to really be critical of his views. And maybe at some point we'll debate his views more directly when it comes to specifics. So one time he mentioned that the United States need to have industrial policy because of all the job losses because of China. I laid into that. If we had really discussed all of his views in detail, it would have been a different debate. It was the debate about individualism with the pluses and minuses that involves. But this is, I hope, not the last time we debate. I hope he's open to debating some more. And having more discussions so that we can bring out those ideas and so I can illustrate to you guys how bad they really are. If you believe in liberty, if you believe in freedom, if you believe in capitalism, national conservatism is the enemy. Not the only enemy, but it's certainly an enemy of equal stature with some of our other enemies. There is no area of agreement, and those of you who are obsessed by the idea that the only enemy is the left, and you think that you can cooperate with anybody as long as you beat the left, you are the people who will be responsible when fascism comes about in this country, left fascism or right-wing fascism, because you will be the people who have sanctioned that those are the only two alternatives. Instead of forming a coalition around the ideas of individualism to stand up to the fascists of the left and the fascists of the right, to stand up against collectivism and stand for something. But no, I do not form coalitions around the evil of the left with people who I think politically would bring about disasters that are equal to or close to equal to. I don't care which band of collectivism is worse. Collectivism is evil. Collectivism will kill you. Slow, fast, will kill you in one way or kill you in another way. It will kill this country. Now, I happen to think that this country will only accept one form of collectivism. But it doesn't matter whether we die here of communism. I mean, look, I've said this so many times. The only reason, a Mussolini or a Hitler could rise up is because people like us bought into the idea that socialism was the enemy and we would fight it together. I mean, that's the whole story of right-wing fascism coming about, is it always rises up in opposition to communism. It always rises up because the people who are not fascists and are not communists and who fear communism ally themselves with the fascists in order to fight the communists. But guess who wins from that alliance? Guess who benefits from that alliance? Guess who benefits when the good compromises with evil? Only evil. The good doesn't benefit. Yes, you don't get communism. You get an alternative way to die. And but nobody's fighting. If you sanction bad ideas, you are no longer fighting for good ideas. When you sanction bad ideas, you've given up on the good ideas. So yes, we're a tiny minority, but we are a tiny minority that needs to fight all our enemies. All our enemies. And all our enemies are fundamentally the same. They're all collectivists. They're all, deep down, subjectivists, including the religionists, are all subjectivists in the end. Where do they get their truth from, if not from their emotions? So we are individualists, and as individualists, we fight collectivism. We fight collectivists, no matter what sheep's clothing they wear, no matter what they look like, no matter what they claim to propose. Collectivism is the enemy, always and everywhere. And if you say, no, I'm going to work with the collectivists who are less bad, guess what? They're not going to stay less bad. And once they implement their collectivism, you're going to be the first victim of that. So, I don't know. I'm obviously, this is a point I've been making for, 5-6 years now, over and over and over again. I'm obviously not communicating it very well or not being convincing, or you guys are not open to being convinced. I don't know. Something is amiss. Jamie, thank you for the support from Mexico. Really appreciate that. Colin, thank you. Yesterday's show was fantastic. I appreciate that value for value. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Bonnie, thank you. Really appreciate that. We are, we're still $400 short. So, I'm not sure. Maybe don't cause me to get all depressed by inability to get to our targets. All right, let's see. Where do we? I want to talk more about individualism. There was one point I wanted to make because of a question yesterday, and I didn't say enough about it, I think. And that is about what is essentially individualism. Is individualism a moral point, or is it individualism a political point? And I think it's important here. It's important to get this right? And by the way, I highly recommend, if you want to understand the issues that we're talking about politically, one of the really cool books that have come out in recent time was Textbook on Americanism that Jonathan Hoenig was responsible for editing. And there's a whole section there by Ayn Rand on individualism, but then there's the whole book with lots of intellectuals writing essays that I think are about individualism. What is Americanism if not individualism? Those are synonymous. Those are the same thing. In that, Ayn Rand writes, in textbook of Americanism, Ayn Rand writes, do not make the mistake of the ignorant who think that an individualist is a man who says, I'll do as I please at everyone else's expense. An individualist is a man who recognizes the inalienable individual rights of man, his own and those of others. Note her focus on rights, right? Rights are a moral political concept. Individualism, I think, is a moral political concept. It's a bridging concept. It defines ultimately where you are politically. It defines your focus, your orientation, what you're going to focus on politically. But by calling it individualism, you are linking it to a particular morality, a morality that recognizes the sanctity of an individual, a morality that recognizes your aim as a pursuit of happiness. Collectivism is the same thing. It is a term that basically orients you towards politics, a particular type of politics. It doesn't tell you socialism, fascism, the particular type of collectivism you're going to be oriented towards, but it presents it as the individual is subservient to the group. Politically, we must place the group above the individual in one form or another, and therefore in morality, it comes from the idea that your purpose in life as an individual is to sacrifice to the group. The group is more important than you. She can see the integration of politics and morality, and collectivism and individualism are these integrating concepts. So whereas capitalism doesn't orient you towards morality, Americanism doesn't orient you towards morality. Socialism doesn't necessarily orient you towards morality. Neither does fascism. Collectivism does. Collectivism says it's immediate that the collectivism is superior. That the collective is superior to the individual. And somebody like Yoram Hazony is going to say, oh, no, I value the individual. Individualism is good, but the state is more important. We need ultimately for the state to determine a path. We need somebody to decide what we're going to do as a collective. And he's a collectivist in that sense, in every sense, right? So yeah, some are more tolerant of individual freedom than others, but at the end of the day, the authority to determine how much freedom you should have is determined by the leadership, the state, the people responsible. And I think one of the things the National Conservatives want to do is give that leadership a lot of power, much more power than the Founding Fathers wanted to give them. So collectivism is the idea that the state is more important, or the collective is more important than the individual, and it indicates a direction in terms of politics, It doesn't give you the particulars. And individualism, in a sense, says the same thing. Just individualism, there's only one manifestation of individualism. There are many manifestations of collectivism, and the one manifestation of individualism is capitalism, right? So, in my view, individualism and collectivism are the right political spectrum to think about. Collectivism is bad, individualism is good. You have some political systems that are more collectivist, some political systems that are more individualistic, but that's the spectrum. The extent to which individual rights are protected, the extent to which individual rights are respected. So, to quote Ayn Rand, same passage, just to read it again. Do not make the mistake of the ignorant who think that an individualist is a man who says, I'll do as I please at anyone else's expense. An individualist is a man who recognizes the inalienable individual rights of man, his own and those of others. An individualist is a man who says, quote, I will not run anyone's life, nor let anyone run mine. I will not rule, nor be ruled. I will not be master, nor slave. I will not sacrifice myself to anyone, nor sacrifice anyone to myself. That's Ayn Rand out of textbook of Americanism, which is in Jonathan Honing's new book. And that formulation makes clear the foundation on which you build a political system. So it doesn't tell you the specifics about how government should function and you know, the distribution of power and checks and balances and any of that. It doesn't give you the details of the political system. It gives you the foundational principle of the political system to protect individual rights. Well, here's another quote from Ayn Rand. This one is from the essay on racism, the virtue of selfishness. Individualism regards man, every man, as an independent, sovereign entity who possesses an inalienable right to his own life, a right derived from his nature as a rational being. Individualism holds that a civilized society, or any form of association, cooperation, or peaceful coexistence among men, can be achieved only on the basis of the recognition of individual rights, and that a group, as such, has no rights other than the individual rights of its members. That's individualism. That's the foundations on which you build a political system of individualism, in contrast to the political system of collectivism, which rejects individual rights and places the individual beneath, if you will, subservient to the group, whatever the group happens to be, whatever the group happens to the mechanism by which the group happens to make decisions for itself. All right, I have one super chat question. That's about it. If you want to ask questions, now's the time to do it. Otherwise, I'll do this question and we'll be done with it. It will be done with the show. That is, that'll be the end of the show. We are at around $270. This will be one of the least successful fundraising shows we've ever done in terms of super chat. So it's been a long time since we haven't gotten at least $400 on a show. But anyway, maybe Sunday afternoon is not a good time to do a show from a monetary perspective, even if from other perspectives. All right, Adam writes. So if you want to ask a question, now's the time. Otherwise, we'll answer this question and call it a day. Adam asks, is theocracy animated by the Marxist Catholic synthesis? Animated by the Marxist Catholic synthesis. Catholics being the only intellectuals on that side, yes. Advocating so much faster, advancing so much faster than fighting socialism as such has become a waste of time. No, because so Adam's basically saying, look, aren't these national conservatives or theocrats generally advancing so fast that we should really maybe give up on fighting socialism and just focus on fighting them, because fighting socialism is a waste of time. The real threat is coming from the right. And I'd say no, and the reason is that we don't know exactly how history is going to evolve in the future. Or that's a wrong formulation. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. And the left has a huge advantage. And the huge advantage is their control over the educational institutions. They control over the the universities, the schools, the intellectuals. So I wouldn't write off the socialists, because and the nihilists of the left, because they have the commanding heights. They have the commanding heights of, again, the intellectual establishment. They have the commanding heights of the universities. They have the commanding heights of our school system. They dominate the education of our children. They dominate the media. They dominate all of those aspects. And as such, you can never write them off. You can never assume that they have lost. As long as they command those commanding heights, I can't assume that they have lost. All right, Enric, thank you, Enric. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Adam, for the question. Thessi, thank you. Really appreciate it. Let's see, we've got Aim Batical says he's still going to write a question. He's typing the question, so I'm waiting for him. Simon, thank you. Really appreciate that. Okay, and John asked for $50. That's great. So we're getting some traction here at the very last minute, but we've still got a long way to go to make our numbers kind of work. John says, I just recently moved to Austin area and attended your debate with Yaron. I'm a longtime objectivist. Red Atlas Shrugged as a UT student in 1964. Wow. Well, great. I hope you enjoyed the debate. You didn't say in your comment whether you enjoyed the debate or not. I hope you did. Austin's a great place. I'm glad you moved to Austin. I think we met at the debate. I think we said hello. So I'm sure we have met, but thank you. And thank you for the support. That's very generous, $50. That helps a lot. Thank you, Quint Wickens from Canada. And I'm waiting for Imbatico. Imbatico, where are you? You're supposed to ask a question, and you're not asking it. Let's see if there's any kind of one of the. If you want to, the book on individualism, the book on individualism is the Fountainhead. The Fountainhead is all about individualism in the soul of man. So the Fountainhead's view of individualism is much more ethical. It's much more about living your life for yourself. It's some political. That's what the trial is about, right? It's about property rights and so on. But it's fundamentally ethical. It's about your life, your mind doing its thing. Okay, we've got two questions here, and then we're probably going to call it a day. Although again, we haven't even reached $400, which used to be our goal. In my age group, which by the way, I'm only 21, I've noticed that so many people have contempt for their own existence. And I see this through the rise of environmentalism and socialism. What do you say? Well, I think environmentalism and socialism are rising because people have contempt. These are self-reinforcing kind of things. Environmentalism and socialism breed contempt, but they only find a fertile soil in which to breed, if you will, because people already feel contempt for their own life. The contempt can be a consequence of Christian original sin. That contempt can be the consequence of a low self-esteem. The way you were brought up, the conclusions you came to, the things that happened to you that generated a low self-esteem, and then the environmentalists and the socialists latch onto that. And you're guilty. If you're an environmentalist, you're guilty of being alive. You're destroying the planet. You're destroying nature. By your very existence, are changing the world for the worst, according to environmentalism. And of course, as a socialism, you are, if you're anything but the poorest of the poor, you're exploiting other people. And if you didn't, your parents did. And you are essentially a bad person just by your very existence. And both environmentalism and socialism preach that and advocate for that. So that reinforces this idea of self-contempt. But I absolutely agree with you, Colt. The only reason socialism and environmentalism can find a real place in the minds and hearts of your generation is because your generation lacks self-esteem and your generation lacks any kind of sense of their own self-worth. And that's what that contempt is. And part of it is that they're spoiled, that they don't know what it took to get the wealth that they kind of take for granted. They have their iPhones, they have their computers, they have the internet, and they think these are just metaphysically given, that they just plopped right in front of them. They have no concept of what was necessary in order to create them, to make them. They have no sense of how poor people were before the rise of capitalism. They have no sense of what it's like to be poor in a third world country. Life is easy. It doesn't demand too much of them. The people around them don't demand too much of them. And they take it all for granted. And, they never have gained the self-esteem that comes from understanding how changing the world around you is meaningful and important. All right. right, we have two more questions. So two more questions, and of course you can continue to ask questions, but make them $20 or more questions if you're going to ask now, because it is getting late. We've already gone an hour and a half. So $20 or more. Two more $20 question would actually get us to $400, which would be nice to get to that minimal number if we're not going to make it to 600. How do you get to someone who is irrational, a person who evades reality? How do you convince a person that doesn't accept facts or reason? You don't. You don't. The only way to convince anybody is through facts and reason. There's nothing else. You can manipulate them emotionally, and for a minute they might accept what you say, but that'll be one concrete, 1 minute, one moment, and that's it. And this is where you have to accept, as I have, that I'm not going to convince a lot of people. There's some people that are just, I'm not going to convince. And indeed, more than that, it's a waste of my time to try to convince them. So it's a mistake to assume that you can convince evaders. You can't. Now, maybe you can create some kind of cognitive dissonance or some kind of emotional response to a movie, to a book, or something like that, that shocks them to their senses and brings them back to or brings them to a point of respecting facts and reason. But at the end, the only way to do it is through facts and reason. And maybe the role of emotions is to shock them into a realization of that. Thank you, guys. Andy and Enric have just got us over 400. Now it's tempting to say we should go for 600 because we're at 440 something, or so we might as well just go for the full 600 and call it a day. All right, where are we? Let's take Andy because that's a $20. Enric, that is very generous. I really appreciate it. Enric, $49.99, which basically got us to $440. And there's Frank, who gives another $50 to get us to $489. So now we definitely should be going for 600. Some Cooper tires for the show. Thank you, Frank. Really appreciate it. So a lot of the regulars coming through. Andy, thank you, Andy. A $20 question. Are state rights a valid concept if the means are to protect individual rights more broadly, i.e. balancing branches of government but accepting local abuses, thinking about abortion as an example? No, I mean, I don't think state rights are a valid concept. I don't think one should think about it in terms of rights. In the protection of individual rights, it might make sense for states to be responsible for certain aspects of the law, to be responsible for certain aspects of the protection of individual rights. But it's still true that they cannot legitimately, in the name of state rights, violate anybody's rights, which abortion would do. So let's say we said we're going to leave abortion to the states, and some states ban abortion. That is a rights violation, and therefore would be wrong, and therefore should not be tolerated by the federal government. Now, there are issues where I think you can, there are certain subtleties about whether something is a rights violation or not, or where within the context of not violating rights but of protecting rights, there can be options. I don't know, sentencing a criminal, for theft, 10 years versus 20 years. I don't think all states should have the same. I even think the death penalty probably should be left to the states, although I'm not pro-death penalty, but I think that's something that if you're really a murderer, you don't have a right not to be put to death. I don't think it's good practice to put them to death because of the risk of making a mistake. But it would be valid, I think, in the context of separation of powers, to have, certain definitions of murder. There's some variability there. It's not clear that there's one definition. second-degree murder, third-degree murder, first-degree murder. The differences between those could be different states could have different ones, and it would be good to run experiments around that. There's a variety of things like that I think different states can do differently. But if a state is clearly, unequivocally violating individual rights, as I think a ban on abortion would be, then it's the job of the federal government to say, no, you cannot do that. That's what the courts are for. That's a violation of the Constitution. And you say, but there's no right for abortion in the Constitution. And I say there is. It's in, the Ninth Amendment, which is that the rights enumerated in the Bill of Rights are not the sum of all the rights that exist. That the non-enumerated rights still exist. And as an extension of the right to life, the right to abortion is certainly an extension of the right to life. And since there is a right to life recognized in the Declaration of Independence, and every one of the founding fathers would have said, yes, there is a right to life, the right to abortion is just an extension of that right. Now I know I'm going to get 20 people unsubscribing to the show just because I said that. All right, let's see. Oh, we're getting some good questions suddenly. Try to make the question $20 or more at this point, because otherwise I don't want to be here all day. Let's see. Jean asks, this morning my Christian friend brought breakfast for a homeless man outside of the restaurant we're at. We had a nice discussion about it afterwards. Curious what you'd say in the situation. I'd ask him why. I'd basically ask him why he bought the breakfast. What motivated him to do that? And, I'd be curious about whether he could come up with a rational answer. I mean, I could think of rational answers. If you think about Atlas Shrugged, Dagny at some point gets on the train and she encounters a bum who is, what do you call it? What do they call somebody who rides a train without paying? I forget, right? And he's hungry and she buys him a meal and sits down, they're talking to him. And so she doesn't just, what you'd expect of Dagny, was just to throw him off the train. Stop the train, get him off. We don't give rights for free. She knows, she has a certain understanding of the desperation of people. She's trying to understand that desperation. She's trying to understand what is going on in the world. And therefore, she is willing to sit down and converse with the person in order to gain that understanding. It's not about the name stowaway. Yeah, she finds a stowaway, right? Hobo. Yeah, hobo was the word I was actually looking for. She finds the hobo, right? And she actually engages in that conversation. Now, if you say, look, the people running this country are doing a disaster. There are a lot of people suffering for no fault of their own. Some of them have become homeless, which is all true, by the way. And I feel bad for these people because they're the victims of the system. They're the victims of the mixed economy. They're the victims of, the horrors of the last 20 presidents and what they've brought to this country, and Congress and politicians and the mayors of the cities. And to some extent, at least, some of these homeless people, it's not their fault. And it could be completely rational as a consequence to say, look, once in a while, buy them a breakfast, give them a few dollars as an expression of the fact that I recognize that, this is just, there's certain unfairness in our society that really is there, and it really is there, really is there. This idea that every person who's homeless, every person who's poor, it's their fault is just not true in the world in which we live. They're the victims of collectivism, they're the victims of altruism, they're the victims of the mixed economy, of collectivism. But it would be interesting the extent to which that might have been his rationale versus altruism, versus it's my moral duty, it's what I do, it's there, but for the grace of God go I, right, kind of attitude. So there are a lot of different attitudes that you can get out of him that are interesting to discuss and debate, that are really valuable. Right. By the way, we're now only $40 short of our goal, so if we want to get a couple of $20 questions in, now is the perfect time to do it. I've got 3 more questions, before we're done. So 2 more $20 questions, and we're where we need to be. All right, Shay asks, the OEC trains the next generation of objectivist intellectuals. Should we also have support for the rising artists, businessmen, inventors, others? I think the OEC does that as well, right? Not everybody who's going to go with the OEC is going to become an intellectual. Many of you are going to go to business. Some of you will become artists and inventors and other things. So I don't think the OEC, particularly the undergraduate portion of the OEC, should be viewed as exclusively objective intellectuals. One of its primary goals is to identify those budding, rising intellectuals, to provide them with the education, and then once they finish the OEC, to get them into kind of a graduate program and to get them doing intellectual activities, and then I train them in public speaking, and somebody trains them in even better writing, and on and on and on the training goes. I mean, the training in a sense never ends. We can always learn. I always learn from interacting with intellectuals who know more than I do about objectivism. So the OEC is a broad educational program. Think of it as an undergraduate program. You're not just training intellectuals. But of the 50 who go into the program, and I think the goal next year is to have 100 people start the program, that 100 is not going to be 100 intellectuals. Of those, hopefully we can find 20 future intellectuals. And those 20 would be rolled over into a graduate program. But the other 80 are going to do other things in life, including artists, businessmen, inventors. And if you just are interested in the philosophy, are interested in making your life better because of the philosophy, and you think you can apply that philosophy to your life better, to your business, to your ideas better in the future, you should apply to the OEC, even if you're not going to be and plan to be a professional intellectual. All right, we got 2 last questions. Again, a reminder, we're $40 short, so if 2 $20 questions would be perfect right now. There's one, Bree. The left is great at using language to get an advantage. Absolutely. The right is pathetic at it. Absolutely. But then again, we're not the right. We're the individualists, separate from right and left. Right and left are both collectivists. We, not the right, should learn from success and get a right to hire a linguist. You say collectivist, but you mean anti-individualist or anti-freedom. No, I don't mean anti-individualist and anti-freedom. I mean collectivist. Now, collectivism is anti-individualist and is anti-freedom, but it's wrong to define a term as an anti-something. You got to define it as a positive. As what are they for? That's what gives them power. The left is not anti-individualist. It's pro-collective, which means anti-individualist, but that's not its essential characteristic. So, yeah, I'm happy to talk to a linguist and get advice from a linguist. And I think if you know anything about Leonard Peikoff and have listened to his courses, Leonard is very linguistically oriented, if you will. Words really, really matter to him. The exact definitions of them and how to use them and how to use them effectively. So I think that's true of Ayn Rand. So I think Ayn Rand and Leonard were very attuned to this. But you need to have good linguists. And it's, you know, at the end, the left doesn't win because of how they use language. They win because they find a way to link their language to what the culture already believes. So they capitalize on, for example, the altruism of the culture without calling it altruism. And we're not as good as capitalizing on the culture's virtues. All right, Jennifer, Bree and Jennifer has just got us over the $600. So thank you, Bree. Thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer writes, in order to form a more perfect union in the Constitution, I think means to base it on the correct ideas, not create a collective as Yoram implied. We talk about that in the interview with Lex Friedman. And my view is there is value to a union. Ayn Rand writes about this. There is value in unity. There is value in sharing the same objective and sharing the same values. But how do you form such a unity? You form such unity over the idea of individualism. You form such a unity over the idea of individual rights. The country was unified around the idea of individualism, around the idea of fighting for and respecting and protecting the individual. That's what created the unity in America that created the greatest country in human history. It's not, the idea of a union, a perfect union, is not a collectivistic idea at all. It relates, and indeed, I don't think a mixed economy promotes unity. It promotes splitting up. Splitting up. Enric Teller writes, recommend Brian Williams ending his career speech on State of the USA. He's not ending his career. He's ending his career at Fox. Good for him. I hope the better people leave Fox. Fox is a nest of hornets. Has turned into that. A couple of other good people, relatively good people, left Fox recently. Jonah Goldberg, for example, and somebody else, because Fox has become so nuttily national conservatives. It's a Tucker Carlson network, and I wouldn't want to work for a Tucker Carlson network. But I will look at it. I like Brian Williams. All right, Frank says, who is your favorite intellectual character from the movie? Individualist character from the movies. Oh, wow. Other than Rourke, or Ben-Hur, Spartacus, or even Dr. Frankenstein, individualist. Yeah, Spartacus certainly is. There are a lot. I mean, almost every hero, to some extent, is an individualist. I mean, good hero. One who defines his own values. I'm trying, it's questions like that need to be asked of me in advance, because I don't have that kind of content readily available. The concretes are always hard for me to dig out, like movie names and things like that. Yeah, I mean, I need to think about it. I put it aside, Frank, and I'll think about examples. But almost every, the sheriff in High Noon is clearly an individualist. I mean, everybody's against him. Everybody's against him. And he goes and he fights the bad guys by himself, and he kills them, and he wins. In spite of everybody telling him to run away, to escape. No, he uses his judgment to identify the fact that he must fight, and he stands up to them and he fights. So there's an individualist for you in a movie. It's High Noon. Aim Bodycall, do you support the Electoral College in an objectivist political system, and why? Also, why not ranked choice voting? God, I don't know. I don't know why not ranked choice voting. I'd have to think it through. I don't think it's that important. Again, in an objectivist society, voting is not that important. There wouldn't be so much emphasis on you've got to vote, and voting is your civic duty, or all that stuff. Because voting wouldn't be that important. It would just be about the people in charge of protecting your rights. And yeah, there'd be some need to monitor them and replace them periodically. But it's not like life or death like it is today. I think Electoral College makes sense so that you don't get basically the heavily populated centers having an overweighted voice versus the countryside. But I don't think it's crucial. I don't think any of these aspects are crucial. Also, Electoral College is a way to protect us from populism, although it didn't help us with Donald Trump. So I don't know, and I don't think about it much, because I don't think it's that important. It's not where my focus is. I think that this is, again, one of those things where you can have different countries in the world having individualistic political systems that have different styles of voting, different ways of managing the division of powers and the separation of powers, but all having limited government, but in different capacities and different ways, but all being focused on protecting individual rights. And I think that would be a beautiful thing. Let's see what works best. Donna, thank you. I really appreciate the support. This is great. We've reached our goal and exceeded it. Okay, last question. Howard asks, I recently shared your clip on the West losing manufacturing. We all need to clip our favorite short videos up to upload and share. Short videos do well. Yes, 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 and yes. And there will be a short video from the debate on losing manufacturing, because Yoram Chazoni brought that up, and it was one of my best segments of the debate, because I get excited. When I get excited, I'm better. So that was one where I think Action Jackson will probably clip and put it up there, and it's a good one to share. So yes, and if you know of clips from shows or clips from Q&As or clips from lectures that I've done that you would like to see turned into a short video, let me know, and Action Jackson will do it. We have the capacity to do it, and I'm sure he's always looking for ideas on how to do it so he doesn't have to do it all himself. All right, guys, thank you. This was great. Thank you for in the last half hour, really pitching in and getting us to where we need to be. And we didn't have one person who did all of it. We got a lot of you doing segments of it. Particularly thank you to Enric and Frank and John and Adam, who all pitched in $50 each in the last 40 minutes or so. So really appreciate that. Thank you for all the $20 supporters. Really appreciate that. Thanks for getting us to 600 again. We have Don Watkins on the show on Tuesday. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I think Don and I banter pretty well, and we'll talk about writing and what it takes to write. And you can ask Don any questions that you want. We'll have a show on Thursday. We'll have a show on Saturday and Sunday next week. And have fun. Have a great week. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And I will see you all soon. Don't forget to like the show before you leave. And of course, don't forget to become a monthly contributor at Yaron Brook.